There were rules to the game, lines marked in the sand, and the sides did not cross until you reached them. Initially, there were murmurs that you were on the rise, but these swiftly became into roles of your supremacy. You moved like a shadow, striking with precision and leaving destruction in your wake. Those who were formerly opposed to you are now hurrying to support you, their loyalties changing like the tide. Non-believers, who scoffed at your name, are now singing it, their doubts shattered by the path of winds that you carved into the battlefield. You were no longer just a player in the game. You were the game itself, the most deadly monster ever played, and the whole cosmos had no option but to submit to it. Perception is the essence of power. It is not only about strength. They no longer consider you a competitor. They see you as an unavoidable force. A storm clouds the horizon, and a power bends reality itself. They are hesitant to second-guess themselves and make errors before the conflict even starts because fear does the job for them. Before you raise a finger, before they even start, it is not essential for you to start the activity. Their imaginations will do it for you. Doubt is infectious and might spread like a virus. All it takes is one weak hand or a missing step to infect someone and undermine their confidence just as they begin to dread you. They've already lost the war. They try to resist it, convincing themselves that you are just another player, that mythology is more important than reality, and that you are capable of bleeding and falling at any point. Following that, they approach you. That is the time when it occurs. The change occurs when people regard you as more than just a danger, but as something unpredictable and beyond their control. Unpredictability is your weapon. Those who entered with flames departed with nothing but stillness. Because you do not follow patterns and do not play by the rules. They prepare for the player they expect you to be, only to be greeted with something unexpected. That is what causes them to deteriorate. Because fear isn't loud. It doesn't shout. Rather, it murmurs and remains silent. That just before the assault, when they understand they have no way out, they morph into their own worst adversary. As a consequence, it ate away at them. Even worse, they know it will happen, but they don't know when. The weight of power has the ability to bend, break, and alter loyalties. When the balance of power swings too much in one side, your enemies are conscious of their situation. They had beliefs, associations, and reasons to fight you for a while before giving up. Fear drives people to hesitate, while rationality causes them to rethink. And survival is what motivates them to migrate. Initially, they fought. They pledged to never give up, and they clung to their flags, causes, and pride. The truth, on the other hand, is just concerned with power and has no regard for pride. One by one, they started to fold their arms. Some individuals did it quietly, assuming that no one would notice their conversion, while others made a show of it by openly renunciating their earlier loyalty, in an attempt to persuade others that they had altered their thoughts. In each scenario, the results were the same. They stood first against you, then next to you. This wasn't because they loved or trusted you. Rather, it was because they understood that standing any place else would result in being engulfed entirely. To be more precise, one opponent had built a reputation on competing against you, and the manner they used your name was one of scorn, referring to you as reckless, arrogant, and bound to fail. They accepted everything at face value, or at least they did until they discovered the truth about who you really were. They had to decide whether to fight or join you. They stopped, and that was all that was necessary. When there is hesitation, the structure's walls weaken, similar to a fissure in the foundation. They realized that they weren't battling a player, but a force. Having said that, they did what any wise survivor would do: swap sides. Self-preservation, possibly respect. More importantly, they recognized that yielding was not a defeat. Rather, it was clarity. They realized they had spent their efforts opposing the inevitable. Unlike any other weapon, the truth is more potent. After a large number of them had crossed the line, the conflict ends and becomes a march, a flow or flood that destroys everything in its path. Your enemies will now act as both your army and your foundation. It is not because you forced them to kneel. Rather, they chose to do so. Those who said they would never kneel are now standing by your side. There are some who will not acknowledge the cause. Others will argue that it was a strategic decision or a planned action. However, when there is stillness and no one is looking, they realize that they were not vanquished, but rather persuaded. There are those individuals who never learn. They make fun of you. They distrust you, swearing under their breath that you will never succeed. You can hear their voices in the audience laughing at the prospect of your victory, calling you overhyped, a fluke, or a passing storm. However, when storms take possession of the sky, they do not go away. They first opt to ignore you because doing so is easy. An ignored name has no power. Power, on the other hand, does not need authority. Instead, it puts itself on the conversation. Your first victories are minor, but as they accumulate, they become irrefutable. They are waiting for your domination to come to an end, but it doesn't. They start to transform. The laughing grows uncomfortable, and they begin to pick through your breezes, seeking for a defect, a weakness, or a reason to believe that you are not what they fear. You're nothing at all. The day when they are forced to approach you straight on comes. And that is when the breaking point occurs. You can tell simply by gazing into their eyes, noticing how their self-assurance wanes and how their movements lose their sharpness, that confidence has already started to take root. They seem to be disputing to emphasize their point. However, the facts are unarguable. The first strike lands, followed by the next. The cosmos shrinks with each passing second, and they come to grips with reality. You are neither a coincidence nor an accident. You were the one thing they refused to believe in, until they couldn't do it anymore. And believing became a must. It's completed, before they had an opportunity to realize what had happened. The individuals who mocked you are taking a step back, and their remarks have been replaced with something fresh. Respect, despite how terrible it is for them to admit it. It's clear in the way they look at you and pronounce your name without making fun of you. Up until you came, the game had a rhythm, structure, and balance that allowed everything to stay under control. At first, they tried to play you in the same way as everyone else. They performed the same plays and followed the same rules. They felt that previous success would be repeated. This did not happen. You aren't performing as expected since you're not following their script. Each of their tactics collapsed one by one. Some of them adapted, but most of them did not. Those who failed to pay the price. You aren't just a rival. Instead, you were a force that produced broad upheaval and rewrote the rules with each action you performed. The use of outmoded tactics became futile, and predictability became deadly. You may contribute to his strategy and join this sacred endeavor. Contribute $100 or more. Every payment is God's kindness, and I believe it will return to you greatly, far above your expectations. Remember that his protection and blessing are always with you, especially via your contributions. You become a part of his divine plan. You are a tremendous and brilliant thing, as solid as his massive rock. Unless they altered, they would become extinct. Some individuals stuck to their routines, sure that they would survive the shift, and they tried to cling to the past in order to make the old ways of doing things work. They were the victors. Changes started to happen inside the game itself. They stopped trying to defeat you in the old game, and instead started studying you, watching your actions, learning your methods, and attempting to survive. However, studying does not equate to mastering the game. They might copy, but not create something new. They were always lagging behind because, while they tried to understand your approach, you were busy devising the next one. The more plays you made, the more they had to adapt, and the more triumphs you had, the more power you had over the game. Previously, you were just another player, a name among many. But now, the game centers around you. You can affect how they exercise, plan, and think. You don't just obey the rules. You determine what those rules are. Leave a remark indicating you don't play the game. I determine how it will be performed. If you understand the rules, you should be ready to tolerate those who break them. People like stories, prophecies, and legends that have been written before they begin. They want to think that authority is handed down. They want to think that destiny chooses and that certain individuals are selected because you are not a heavenly power who has predetermined your future. There was no fate that etched your name in stone, and no higher force whispered your triumph while others waited for a sign. You choose to pick yourself. You relocated while they were searching for a reason. You created your own. Every step, every sacrifice, every risky deed. It belonged completely to you. You were accused of recklessness, and they said that you were attempting to push something that was not meant to be. However, meaning is a prison for the weak. Purpose is not something given to you. The selected people sat on their thrones, expecting the crown to be put on their heads as a sign of recognition from the rest of the world. You didn't wait. You went ahead and accepted it. Because of this, you are a dangerous person. It wasn't handed to you. You worked hard for it. Rather than being born with an advantage, you made one for yourself. They have yet to understand the notion. They are hunting for the secret, shortcut, and hidden prophecy that explains why you exist. Your strength isn't engraved in the stars. Rather, it is etched into the battlefield, into the scars of every war you have survived. There is no such thing as supernatural powers. An excuse is a tale created by someone who is too afraid to take control of their life. You are not the one chosen. Rather, you were the one who made the choice. Because of this, you are unstoppable. You are not dangerous only because of your power, speed, or intellect. Rather, it is something more deep, which they cannot measure. And it is your intuition, accuracy, and patience. However, you do not have to use raw force to gain strength, as others do. It's not enough to just hit harder. One must also be able to attack at the appropriate time. The great majority of individuals behave impulsively. They reacted. They swing madly, hoping to create a ball. Each and every action has a purpose, and each and every action has weight. You wait. You watch and calculate. The capacity to manage the conflict before it ever starts is what distinguishes you from others. What distinguishes you is more than just your fighting skill. They see your lack of action as a sign of hesitation, and they believe your silence is a sign of reluctance. That's not the case. You don't move because you don't have to. Not at this time. Then in the blink of an eye, it takes place. A transition, a strike, a time when everything is in perfect harmony. Your energy is not squandered, and you do not second-guess yourself. The chance presents itself, and you grasp it. One thing that distinguishes them is their inability to predict what will happen. Others depend on the upheaval, but you make the unavoidable. Some people call it talent, luck, or a gift, but it isn't. It takes skill to obtain mastery. One must suffer, fail, and grow oneself in a relentless and terrible manner. They try to research and duplicate it, but it's difficult to imitate something you don't understand. You are not just accountable for what you do. You are also accountable for what you know about the game, the battlefield, and your opponent's psyche. It's not only that you play. You also command, direct, and control the scenario. This is why they're terrified of you. You are more than just a threat. Instead, you are assured. Your ascension was not just yours. It caused shockwaves to be shot forth. Initially, they thought it was confined. Your wins were isolated, and your influence was limited to the battlefield's boundary. Nonetheless, they made wrong assumptions. There is a transfer of power. It is communicated via whispers, actions, and undeniable evidence. Those closest to you were the first to experience it. They adapted, adjusted, and changed the way they moved. The dominoes farther distant started to move as well, resulting in a chain reaction in which each domino was followed by the next. Enemies were more wary, while competitors turned into reluctant friends who finally became more alert. Even those who had never met you could sense it. Given that the game was moving beneath your weight, they had no option but to do so. Old leaders battled tooth and claw to keep their positions of power, and their formerly invincible methods were suddenly rendered useless. Hierarchies broke down. They kept an eye on you, investigated you, and attempted to understand what distinguishes you from others. They opted to duplicate what they could and make adjustments where necessary, knowing that if they didn't, they'd fall behind. It was no longer just an issue of survival. Rather, it was about being relevant. Your very existence forced evolution. It demanded adaptation, and it forced them to reconsider everything they had previously taught themselves about power. You may contribute to his strategy and join this sacred endeavor. Contribute $100 or more. Every payment is God's kindness, and I believe it will return to you greatly, far above your expectations. Remember that his protection and blessing are always with you, especially via your contributions. You become a part of his divine plan. You are a tremendous and brilliant thing, as solid as his massive rock. Those who were the first to fall despised it, battled against it, and held the past with injured hands. Smart individuals did not attempt to defy the current. Rather, they let it carry them and form them in the image of the stream. Mostly because only idiots stay stable in a changing environment. You did not just prevail. You did not just dominate. You changed the course of the game for everyone. Some individuals refuse to admit this. They will argue that they were always going in this path, and that their transformation was something they decided to undertake. The reality, however, is plain. They changed because of you. Previously, they would mock you, call your approaches irresponsible, and argue that your plan was flawed. However, following that, they started losing one by one. Throughout the struggle, their confidence was shattered, their techniques exposed, and their pride crumbled to dust under your feet. As a result, they did what any desperate person would do: study you. Initially, it was not clear. There were just slight changes, such as a different footwork or style of thinking. They mimicked your timing, patience, and perfection. They tried to persuade themselves that it was a strategic move, that they were modifying, evolving, and learning on the battlefield. However, the truth was considerably more plain. They weren't simply adapting. Rather, they were imitating. Each action you derided proved to be a great lesson. Each of the choices you ridiculed turned out to be a template. You observed their arrogance transform into a nice reply, and their insults faded into quiet. They assumed you would not notice that they could take your skills without repercussions. On the other hand, power does not work in this way. A copy is never an original, and a reflection is never the real thing. They could copy your actions, but not your ideas, despite being able to witness your activities. They were unable to replicate your instincts since they were not built in the same manner as you. They did not withstand the fire. They didn't suffer for every inch of progress. And they didn't chisel their brilliance from the ashes of their own mistakes. They want success without the difficulty, mastery without the sacrifice. And they wanted everything right now. As a result, they would always be there to help you. You did not simply understand the game. You may contribute to his strategy and join this sacred endeavor. Contribute $100 or more. Every payment is God's kindness, and I believe it will return to you greatly, far above your expectations. Remember that his protection and blessing are always with you, especially via your contributions. You become a part of his divine plan. You are a tremendous and brilliant thing, as solid as his massive rock. Instead, you rewrote it. You had perfect control over every move, technique, and unexpected change before they had an opportunity to assert it. They were chasing a shadow while straining to keep up with something they could never fully fathom. Some of them felt that if they studied hard and trained for long enough, they would be able to compete with you on an equal footing. Their notion was erroneous, because power does not reside in imitation. Rather, it rests in mastery. They try to reverse engineer your successes, but they ignore the previous failures. They don't learn from your errors or losses, which taught you where to attack and when to wait. People just see the final outcome. They are not privy to the proceedings. As a result, they will always be a step behind the competition. In the end, they were only a reminder. They were a mirror of something bigger, a mirror that could never produce its own light. They tried to become you, but in the end, they were only a reminder. Until they realized how much it would cost. Everyone was interested in the throne. There is intense rivalry to reach the top, but few people are aware of what happens after they do. At first, it seems to be a win. The loudness of the throng, the quiet of those who questioned you, and the weight of every conflict that has passed you by. Now, however, there is a lingering quiet since no one remains. There is no equivalent, opponent, or challenge that causes your heart rate to increase to its pinnacle. You are the lone one battling the people below. You continue to fight, but not against yourself. Instead, they strive to be you, to take your position, and to prove that they are stronger, quicker, and better than you. At this point, you're not pursuing. Rather, you're being chased. Each move is analyzed. Every option is investigated, and every facet of vulnerability is sought for. Just winning isn't enough for them. They also want to demolish what you have built. It is your obligation to be the standard, the measure by which everyone else is assessed, rather than as a gift or award. It is a burden that you must endure. They demand excellence. After a single error, the murmurings start. After one defeat, the vultures start to circle. No matter how many times you have prevailed in the past, they are only interested with the moment you lose. This is because the world does not love monarchs. Rather, it likes seeing them burn. Either you adapt to the circumstances or you crumble. Some people are unable to resist the pressure they apply. They have uncertainties and let the weight crush them. You do not. And you are aware that keeping one's place at the top is more difficult than gaining it. Control is not a transient experience. Rather, it is a battle, a struggle that never ends. As you ascend higher, the air thins and the road becomes more lonely. You didn't get this far only to give up, did you? They're going to make an attempt. They intend to plan, scheme, and pray for your destruction. Allow them to do so because the weight you bear helps you get stronger. People have tales to share about you. Some claim that you are unstoppable, untouchable, more powerful than mankind, and a legend inscribed into the battlefield itself. Others believe that your luck is the result of timing or a fluke that has yet to be discovered. Both of them are erroneous. You were not born for this. You were not chosen. There was no prophesy that cemented your name in history. You did it yourself. The reality is more caustic, direct, and substantially harsher. Every wound reveals the truth. Every setback, failure, every situation in which you had the option to give up but decided not to. They want to hear something bigger. Something that makes your assertion seem inevitable. Something that makes their own shortcomings seem lesser since the truth is unpleasant. They don't want to hear that. They want a story, something magnificent. The reality is that you were not more strong than them when you initially began. You are not more intelligent. You're not faster. You're simply more persistent. You worked while others slept. You kept moving while they stood still and pushed when they halted. They refused to accept this since doing so would indicate that their place in the game is decided by choice, namely their own decision, rather than destiny. It is not true that you are extraordinary or destined for success. Rather, you just refuse to accept loss. This is real dread. They do not notice the hours, repetition, or suffering. They don't notice the nights you spent polishing your edge while they slept. They look at your accomplishments and claim it wasn't tough at all. However, they are aware of the mountain. They are not aware of the rise. As a result, they tell themselves a different tale, claiming that you were given something while they were not, that it was easy for you, and that you didn't have to put up with falsehoods. You persevered, put in more work, dealt with the blows, failures, and disappointments, and kept going. It is for this reason why you stand when others do not. However, believing a myth is far easier than believing the reality. Myths portray success as unreachable and beyond their control since, in truth, it is a decision. They're afraid of it. If it had been an option, they could have chosen it as well. However, they did not choose it. You did. And this is why the mythology will always be less important than the facts. When there is no one left to face, when every competition has been vanquished, when every enemy has given up, and even the very mention of your name causes others to pause. What results may be predicted in the last stage, which is the apex. At this stage, success becomes an expected rather than a question. The last stage has come. However, there is a cost connected with expectations. Legends do not slumber, and kings do not propose. The weight of authority remains unchanged once it is in your grasp. Rather, it becomes heavier.